Hey, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Katie and this is Rouse Rising, my little place on the internet where I share with you nourishing meals and holistic homemaking. If you're into all that, click the subscribe button down below. Today we are making a delicious, nutritious bone broth. You can use any bones that you have available to you. Today I am using pork bones, but this works across the board for all your bones. So come along with me and let's get your pantry stocked with this easy method and recipe.
All right, so we are going to make a big old batch of broth. One way that you can use up all of your year-old or 6 months to a year-old freezer meat is to can it, and that will extend the life of it. So we are going to make up this huge batch of pork bone broth in our crock pot, and we are going to be canning this up for the pantry. Always check your oven. This is 400 degrees right now. It's preheating, but I just went ahead and put the pork in there to get it going. I'm going to be adding some onion and celery to this, and we are going to make a delicious pork stock. I think I'm going to do the Instant Pot too. And we're going to have both of them going. Peppercorns. A teaspoon of peppercorns in each one. Annika, will you see if there's a bag of onions over there, sweetheart? Thank you, baby. You're such a helper. Yeah. You're my little kitchen helper. Okay, we're going to throw these onions in with the pork and just get a nice caramelize or nice flavor on these onions. You can do that with the celery too, I just didn't. You can be as flexible as you want to be when you're making your broths. You can add whatever spices and ingredients you prefer. Mine's different every time. If you look at my stash of broth, then you will see that all of them are different colors. They all have different stuff in them. It just goes based off of what I have. And I'm actually going to look in my freezer and see what other vegetables I have that I can add to this broth to give it more depth.
That's my favorite.
It is. Right here, I actually have some old pork T-bone. What were those? Pork chop bones. So I always save the pork chop bones and throw those in my bone broth too.
Once the bones are nice and roasted and have a bit of brown color on them, I'm going to add them to my pots of water that I have started boiling or simmering away with my vegetables in it. This is a flexible recipe. I don't use exact measurements. I just throw some bones in some pots and make sure that they're covered with water and let them simmer away. You can get some more color on your onions if you want to, but I wasn't too worried about it. I just threw them in there, and then I'm going to throw in a splash of apple cider vinegar into each one. This helps get some of the nutrients out of the bones. All right, this has been cooking for 24 hours now. I'm not canning it today. I'll probably strain this out and get it in the refrigerator, let it cool off and get it in the refrigerator. And then I'm going to skim the fat off tomorrow, get it canned up. I'm probably going to dump both of these together in a large stock pot to cool off. I'll set that outside with a lid on it and let it cool on the front porch, and then we'll be sticking it in the refrigerator this evening so that we can heat it back up tomorrow and can it in the pressure canner. This is the pork broth. You can already see there's about 1/2 inch of fat on top. It's a lot. It's hard to get a good angle of it, but quite a bit of fat on top. So I'm gonna set this in the refrigerator so that this can firm up all of the fat, and then we are going to put it back on the stove and heat it up to boiling and pour it into hot jars that are heated up in the oven at 200 degrees Fahrenheit. Those jars are going to go into my hot pressure canner, and we are going to can this broth for 90 minutes. Okay, so we want to try to skim out as much of the fat as possible. Oh shoot, I should have showed you guys what it looked like on the inside. So this is the broth now, and I was able to skim off all this fat. I put it in the refrigerator overnight, and I made a little bit of a mess on the side, but it'll have a little tiny bit of residual fat in there. Hopefully it doesn't affect the sealing too much. But I'm going to heat this up, get it going, get my canner going, and then we're going to can this. In a 200-degree heated oven, I throw washed glass jars to preheat. This also helps sterilize them. And then I'm going to add water and a splash of white vinegar to my canning pressure cooker. This is going to help prevent any white stains on the outside of my jar. We're going to start this heating up on the stove top. Make sure that it is going nice and hot. I want all of my lids getting warmed up in some water on the stove. And then we are going to take out 3 jars. It doesn't matter how many jars you take out. This is what I do. And if I could find my other funnel, I would have 2 funnels on top of these. But alas, the kids have nabbed all of my canning supplies. And this is what I'm working with today. This is done before I purchased a new canning kit. So I've replaced all of my lost items. I'm sure they're out buried somewhere in the sandbox or in the yard. But I've got some new ones that I'm going to keep inside of my big canning pot that was recommended to me by one of the subscribers here on this channel. And I just wiped the rim lid with a vinegar soaked cloth. I'm using a clean cloth to wipe all the jar rims to make sure first that there's no nicks on the jar rims, and also to make sure that there's no fat or broth or chunks of meat or anything like that, no debris. I want to make sure that my lids seal very nicely, so you want to have a very clean and dry surface for those lids to go onto. So I'm not really in a rush. This is just time-lapsed, but I am going to be adding some canning salt. I just remembered. So I like to salt my broth. That way I can just dump it into my rice and cook my rice, and I don't have to add anything else to it but a jar of broth and 2 cups of rice, and boom, we're all set. And then these are my warmed up lids going right on top. And once those are on top, I'm going to make sure that I screw on the lid finger tight, and that is I just twist it on until the jar starts to turn, and when the jar starts to turn, I'm done. And then I put these into my pressure cooker that is already warming, and I'm going to continue this process until my pressure cooker is full of jars or until I run out of broth, whichever comes first. This is the exact same method that I use for every single broth that I make, and it's just straight up across the board. My pressure cooker is full, or actually I'm out of broth at this point, so it's not quite full. I'm going to put my lid on top. I'm checking to make sure that the seal and everything is in place, that all the parts and pieces are there. I am sealing up my pressure cooker. I am not adding the weight yet. I'm just showing it to you. I'm setting that aside. Once this little pressure indicator on the front pops up, you see it's spitting right now. It's spitting lots of water. But back there in the back is where my weight is going to go. You see steam back there. This is where my pressure indicator is. And once this is pressurized, that's going to pop up. Once it pops up, then we can add our weight to that back vent. And that is going to cause the dial to go up in pressure. And we need it to go to 12 psi. Once it's at 12 psi, well, right now it's at 15 psi. So I'm going to have to back off my heat a little bit. And we're going to try to hold it steady at 12 psi for 90 minutes. After 90 minutes, I let this completely depressurize all by itself. There are my jars. I didn't have any siphoning. Everything looks beautiful and perfect. There's no fat floating in there. I'm taking my jars out and setting them on the counter where they are going to rest for the next 24 hours. And I already hear some of the lids popping, so I know that some of them are starting to seal. I am pretty confident that most of this batch is going to seal. Also, I want to remind you to make sure that you date and label the contents of your jars. That is very important. And then in 24 hours, we are going to be removing these bands and cleaning the jars with soapy warm water on a washcloth to get rid of any fat or residue, anything that could potentially grow bacteria on these in storage. You want to make sure that you are putting away clean jars. I'm showing you my water. It's nice and clear, no siphoning. This is a successful canning batch for me.
Oh no, we've got a crack in the jar. So I'm gonna have to use this one up first. It looks like it's on the exterior, not the interior, so I'll double check, but yeah, I'll be using this jar first. If it's an exterior crack, as long as it's not on the inside where glass may have gotten in the broth, it should be good to go. The rest of them looking good.
For 24 hours, I remove the bands and I lift up by the lid, and if the jar lifts up and the lid stays on, it is good to go. It is good for your pantry. Just give these a wipe down with a soapy water rag and make sure they're nice and clean before you store them away and enjoy your broth. Thank you guys so much for watching. Until next time, see you soon. Bye.